Hi everyone, this is Jeff Welch. Thank you for visiting here with me at Welch Family Homestead. I'm not going to pretend that today is going to be the best video. It's hot. It's been very hot all day, very humid. This is July. But one of the things that I noticed here in the garden was that we were low on nitrogen in some of the areas, especially for certain plants like green beans. Green beans require a lot of nitrogen. Obviously, I don't want to put any chemical fertilizers on the garden. And so we're going to do something a little different today. And that something a little different is going to be worm castings. Worm casting tea is one thing. Worm casting watering is another thing. This is more like worm casting watering. I call it worm casting tea or worm tea. But basically, I just take worm poo and I drop about, maybe two or 3 pounds of worm castings or worm poo in a 5-gallon bucket. Then I'm gonna fill that bucket up full of water. Okay, so I have some worm castings in here. This is basically worm poo, which is dirt that they have processed, the worms have, and it's full of good micro ingredients in it. So what I'm gonna do is, so obviously we grow organically here. So what I gotta do is make sure that we give our plants what they need. This water is coming from the lake, my lake here on the farm, which is spring fed. So we know it has no chemicals in it, no chlorine. You gonna let me fill this up? Fontana will not let me fill this up. So long story short, we're going to mix this up really good and we're gonna pour it on our plant. And one of the things that you do not want to do is to use tap water that has chlorine in it and other chemicals. Tap water that's coming through your system, especially if you live in subdivisions or live in the cities where you have municipal water systems, they require chemicals to be added to kill bacterias, whether there are any bacterias in the water or not. And those chemicals will kill the microorganisms, the biodiversity that's in the worm castings that you need for your fertilizer. You see, this is all about organic gardening. You want to make sure that everything that you're putting into the garden, if you're growing organically like we are, and right here in this area here where you see the 3 rows of green beans, we have a nitrogen deficiency, which is normal. It's very normal. But the way that you boost that is you have to put something in there that has a higher nitrogen content. And manure always has a higher nitrogen content. Now, some manures are a little too strong just to put directly onto your garden. Worm poo, worm castings is what it's called. I'll just call it worm castings from here on out in the video. Worm castings are phenomenal because you see the worms, they're taking in the dirt as they crawl through the dirt. They're digesting the microorganisms that are in the dirt, and that dirt comes out the other end. And that is basically a dirt that is mixed with their perfection of great fertilizer, which is what we call worm castings. So because of the nitrogen needed, you'll also see that the Japanese beetles start attacking the plant. That's not gonna necessarily hurt the plant. We're not gonna put any insecticides on it, but you can see where they've been eating on the leaves. Actually, I'm not having a problem with that, but we will keep a watch on it. And when it starts producing beans, we'll have that under control to a certain point. But it's all natural, it's organic, so we're not using any chemicals. It's expected. But if it's low in nitrogen, you can bank on the fact that it's going to take on a less of an immune system to anything that's going on, including the strength to fight back. Now, the worm castings usually are about 0.5% nitrogen, 0.5%. Very low in nitrogen, but yet very high compared to the soil. And it helps boost that soil, but it's also water soluble, okay? Because worms poo soil, which is cool. It's really great. And they also have that soil mixed in with whatever they've been eating, which could be table scraps or what have you. They love, if you're growing worms, I would suggest going over to a buddy of mine. He just started a new channel. He's a pastor friend that I have known for many years, a preacher that has just gotten into growing worms and is going to be ramping that process up for his worms and his worm castings. And I'm very proud of him. If you'll just go to Wiley Worm Farms, Wiley Worm Farm, W-I-L-E-Y, Wiley Worm Farms. That's his, and I'll put the link in the description below of how to get to his channel here on YouTube, where he just has started a channel talking about growing his worms, and he's excited about this new venture, this new thing he started by growing worms. Now, I started growing worms alongside my grandfather when I was just a kid. And now you can go to different places and buy worms from worm farmers to get started. We started by me and my brother going out into the forest in North Georgia and raking the leaves back and getting the worms and taking them to my grandfather. And then he would, from that point, cultivate those worms. He would grow those worms and collect their eggs, which is called cocoons, and then it would basically multiply his worm business. And he provided fishermen with worms. He wasn't into the worm casting business, but he was into the worm business, where he furnished worms for fishermen. And that was years ago. And I learned a lot from him, but at the same time, I would have a lot to learn if I got into the worm business myself. I'm not in the worm business, but Larry Wiley at Wiley Worm Farms is getting into the worm business, and he's just now getting started. And I suggest following him as he grows in that process of raising worms and getting into the worm casting business and the worm business. I'm sure that as his learning curve is aggressing, you will learn with him, and that's the best way to learn, in my opinion, because you see everyone's experience from their beginning. And a lot of times when you're following people who already know it all, sometimes you miss a lot of important information, or you listen to people that are talking a different language than you are, and when you need to start learning from people who are learning at the same time you are. I believe that is also a major way to learn that you don't miss as much.